Hello, wonderful people. My name's Omari. Today we're going to be having an epic conversation across all things university, going to university, graduating, and everything in between. I'm joined by the wonderful, the magnificent, the brilliant Amber. Amber's a sales executive, a speaker, a content creator. She does it all, and I'm so excited to speak with her today and dig into everything and get you guys some gems. So without further ado, let's get started. Amber, how you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for joining me and being here today.
No problem. Happy to be here.
So let's get started. How was university for you? Which course did you study at university?
At uni, I studied psychology because when I originally went to uni, it was because I wanted to be a psychology teacher. But then halfway through, I kind of changed directions. So, yeah, not in psychology anymore.
Oh, I love that. But how did you find that? How did you navigate that then kind of midway? Around which point did you figure out, actually not sure if I want this is for me?
I think being a teacher has always been my purpose. But when I was at university, I used to work in like retail and sales as my part-time job. And from doing that, I sort of realized that, maybe this can be a passion as well that could be explored. And it's sort of a lot more lucrative at this stage of my life where I'm just trying to build my wealth. And then I sort of explore the teaching side and passion projects. But in terms of navigating it, I didn't actually realize that I was enrolled onto a placement year course until my university was like, yep, so time to get your internship placement job. And I was like, oh, okay then. And then my friend was sort of like to me, I feel like you should explore the other route because it's the least commitment time that you'll get to explore different routes with like not so much to think about or not so much to lose. So then I just started to look for jobs in sales, and that's how I sort of went off track from the original path and ended up where I am now.
Oh, I love that. There's so many different parts there to zoom in on. You said that whilst you was at university, you kind of changed direction. When you was going through that process then of whilst you was also working, how was that? How did you kind of balance the working part-time whilst also being at university? Because not everyone actually works when they go to uni.
Yeah, I think for me, working was the only thing that made uni possible because of the fact that with me, I get so like university can get so intense that work was my escape. And because I didn't really have the best social life at uni, working in retail and speaking to customers, having colleagues, they were essentially my social life. So if I didn't have that and all I had was my books, all I had was my studying, or when I did try to do that, it was just counterproductive and it was actually worse for me. But I know that's not the case for a lot of people.
So when you've now decided, okay, I'm going to kind of go into that kind of sales space, and you talked about kind of like your internship. I think it's great that you did an internship whilst you was at uni.
Thank you.
What was that like? Like, what was it like applying? What was it like? Did you know kind of which kind of companies you wanted to target? Just what was walk me through that.
Yeah, I think, well, the first company that I applied for was like because they were all tech companies and I just went off of like, I liked the brand, I used the product. So I was like, yep, let me apply for that. I applied for that, didn't get it. Then I was like, that's when I started to look at like tech, but not the non-technical side of it. So like these sort of companies and the things that they do. And that's why I started to learn about just their company culture and what they stand for and stuff like that. So for me, it was very straightforward. And one thing I often recommend is that, and which is often overlooked, is that people should apply directly on the website, because I know there's like a lot of job boards that people go to apply for, but again, because I wasn't the best like serious university student, I didn't even think to use these job boards. So I just thought of a company or even the company that I'm working at now. I literally just saw the product on a TV advert and I was like, yeah, it'd be cool to work for them. And I literally typed in jobs at that company and applied there. So that's just how I've got like all the offers that I have got is just going directly to them. So yeah.
That's great. No, I love that answer. And I think you're very impressive. I think it's great to hear like your approach is very proactive, that you was able to kind of devise your own strategy to go out and kind of get these roles. We was talking about the kind of internship experience and some of the things that you learned from when you went for some of these roles, but you didn't get them. So what you took away from that?
So I just became very desensitized to it, but I became desensitized to like job rejection much before it was in the university, the professional job context, because when I was applying for my first like retail jobs at 17, and this was back when like it was CVs. I don't know if they still do like paper CVs.
Yeah.
I don't know, but
I remember that.
Yeah, I remember. So I remember going to like my local shopping centre and just giving out my CV. And I remember my mom saying to me, "You'll probably hand out 100 just to get one back." And from her saying that at 17, that's just it's just a numbers game. So it was never personal. Well, it's personal to an extent because clearly there's something that you're not why your CV's not getting the attention at that point in time. But like even one of the companies that rejected me ended up offering me a job like later down the line. So it's like I just became desensitized to it because I just think of it as a numbers thing. So obviously take into consideration if you can get feedback from them why it wasn't successful. Like some of them just don't do that because they're getting so many applicants. But for me, I just didn't really. I think it can definitely be like really like heart wrenching, especially if you've put your soul and like your heart into this one dream company. But I just don't think it's a very practical approach when the odds are against you. But it can still work in your favor.
Yeah, no, I love that answer. I love the things you call out around trying to be practical, trying to take the emotion out of it and almost be like, you know what, it is a numbers game. If I stay on the horse, the more I apply myself, it's going to come. So just kind of like that positive mindset. Very inspirational.
Exactly that.
Okay, cool. So, but you would say though that doing the internship was beneficial, right? Would you say like is it something that you would recommend that current students do, like an internship when they're at university? And what are some of the things you feel like it equipped you with for kind of like your role now?
My experience was a lot more reduced because it was during COVID. So the whole of my internship was online. So I never actually, to this day, I've never actually met the team that I was working with.
Okay.
So it definitely impacted the experience, but it taught you a lot. It taught me a lot about sort of office culture or office politics. Even though it was a virtual version of it, you still got a sort of hint into it. And I think even going back to university after that sort of internship, you come back a different person. Like the quality of your writing, the way that you sort of handle yourself, your time management, it's sort of crazy the impact that it has in that way. So when I then went back to uni, it impacted like my final year. The difference in my grades before and after my internship was like, it was crazy. And then coming out of university and into my professional job now, it's like I already had some of the things, like some of the skills that had been ingrained, even if it's just small things like email etiquette and things like that. Like when you're starting out in these jobs as a graduate, especially like Gen Z, like there's a lot of like things that you may not be have been exposed to, or just Gen Z, we do things differently. So it sort of teaches you how to move appropriately in the corporate environment.
With networking in general, is that something that you embraced from when you was in university? Did it start maybe on internships, or is it actually something that came a bit later, or is that something you're still looking to grow into? How do you feel about networking?
It's definitely something I'm navigating now. As I say, I wasn't doing it at all during university. So I never went to one networking event. I barely knew people at my university, and it's not great, but it's important to know that if you don't do it at university, you haven't missed out in terms of you can still catch up later on. Yeah. I think regardless of where you end up working after university, you will still be able to form those connections. Obviously, ideally, it would be better that you start earlier on, but you're not at much of a disadvantage, or it's not something to worry about if you haven't started forming them whilst at university. I think I've struggled with networking because it's like, what does networking mean? I don't particularly like the word networking. I think it puts a lot more pressure on it than what it is. And I'm just really still navigating what it actually means. It's definitely something I could have done more of at university and been more proactive with at university. I definitely recommend having gone to networking events and stuff like that, because I would have, the answers that I'm answering myself post-uni, I could have answered them pre-graduation.
No, I think that's reasonable though. I think like you called out before, probably networking all about relationships, and like you called out before, there's such a big benefit. Like when you said your manager gave you that gem of, you know what, actually the first 3 months, as much as onboarding, it's really about relationships, because when you have those, then people are more willing to go into the trenches with you. It's easier to collaborate with people. So I loved what you called out about relationships. I want to jump back a little bit though, because we've been talking a lot about some of the great things you've been doing since uni, how your mindset's developed. But talk to me about when you graduated, firstly. Like, what was that like?
I actually graduated a year ago this week.
So when you graduated, what was the journey like once you graduated? Was you applying for jobs in your final year, coming straight off the internship, like I want to get back out there? Or was it more like, actually, I don't know what I'm going to do next? What was the flow like?
For me, I had quite a privileged sort of experience post-graduation because I had received my offer before graduating. So that's what a lot of people, like, that's again one of the benefits to having done an internship, is a lot of people by the end of it would already have secured their like job roles, their job offers. I didn't actually have my offer when I finished my internship, but I got it, I think, February of final year, and then you sort of leave university May, June times. So by the time I got my cap and gown, I'd already had my offer. So it meant that the summer was literally purely about enjoyment and and freedom. So that was really, I was really in a fortunate position for that. But I know that a lot of people aren't in as fortunate position. But yeah, because I had that, it did make things a lot easier. So it was just definitely the case of in final year, a lot of people were just applying for roles, trying to balance out the number game to work in their favor.
Yeah, no, I love that. Sensational. Did you almost treat it like an extra module then in your final year of, you know what, I've done the internship, now it's time for me to kind of secure the graduate position? And what was the application process like? Was it just a CV and cover letter? Did you have to do interviews? And what was that like? How many rounds? Like, how did that go, that part?
Yeah, so I actually only applied for 2 companies. The first was a startup company. And that's when I started to even explore, what does a startup even mean? Like, how does that differ from working at a bigger company and stuff like this? And that one, I didn't get that role. And they didn't, when they gave me feedback, and it was basically because they were saying, at a startup, we need people that are already experienced in it. We sort of don't have the capacity to train you up. You need to have the credentials to you. So I was like, oh, okay, that's a realization. And then I applied for another company. And then that's when I sort of got it was quite a quick turnaround time, I want to say. I think I might have sent the application in probably end of December or early January. And then I had the offer by end of February maybe. But it was a case of so applying online with your CV, there was no cover letter, and then it was just the assessment center, which was like maybe half a day long, maybe from like 9 to 1, or maybe a little bit longer than this. But this was just involving like a one-to-one interview with like a potential manager, and then it's a group interview to see how you interact with other people, and then just an informal chat where you can sort of ask the graduates above you what their experience was like, and sort of the questions that you may not feel comfortable asking in front of like the higher ups.
I've got a few more questions I want to ask you. One of which being, I know you're really passionate and you do a lot of things outside of kind of work and stuff like that. I know some of them started whilst you was in university. Do you have any kind of passion projects that you're kind of working on? And how do you feel like that kind of helped equip you whilst you was at uni for the internship, life now as a graduate in your role?
I would say that I didn't really use them to equip me for my graduate role, but I tried to use them to equip others in the way that I wasn't ready for it. So like, because I do make content about sort of everything that we weren't taught in school, so it will sort of include like how to ace these interviews and stuff like that. I did start it back at university, but I didn't really like focus on it. So back at university, it was more like maximizing like your lecture notes, how to take good like study notes and stuff like that. So that's sort of a passion project that I do on the side.
One of the things that you touched on earlier was, you know, assessment centers. And I know that that's something that gives a lot of people this kind of fear or trepidation. You know, sometimes you're doing these crazy group exercises. You've got to get the boat from one side of the room to the other without touching the floor, all this other crazy stuff. I know you mentioned at yours that you had kind of like a one-to-one interview at your assessment center and kind of like a group interview. How was that experience for you? How did you navigate it, and kind of what tips would you give people for assessment centers in general?
I quite enjoyed assessment centers, but I think they're more intense than an interview because they're an interview plus 3 other things. So you'll have the one-to-one interview with your potential manager, but then you'll also have other interviews with other people, like other workers that wouldn't be in the role that you're interviewing for. And it's just so that they can, when they sit back and they look at, okay, the different candidates, it's so that they can have the different perspectives that other people, how they've taken them in. And sometimes they might end up putting you into a different role that compared to what you originally applied for, because they think you might be a better fit for it. So this is why I always say, a lot of people say like, be yourself, but it's not enough to be yourself. You have to be the best version of yourself. And what that means is it's not necessarily that you might, like, say, for example, you're a quieter person, you're introverted person compared to a louder person. It's not that you now need to pretend to be a louder person, but it means honing on what is your qualities. So, for example, if you're a quieter person, but you know you're good at taking the notes, or you're good at timekeeping, you need to be the best timekeeper, or you need to be the best note taker. Don't try and be something that you're not, but be the best version of what you are.
I love that answer. I remember doing I did an assessment center myself. I remember it was a film company, and I remember us having to do like a group presentation. And it's this idea of what are the different roles, what role should people take, and I was very cognizant of that. You spoke about earlier that he was quite passionate about was interviews and kind of like questions that people can ask. Like, do you have any tips around like specific questions that people can ask at interviews?
Yeah, so I'd definitely say 100% it's essential that you ask a question at the end of the interview, because I think interviewers do just see it. It shows your engagement and how interested you are in the role. One question that I like to ask is, what can I start doing in my life now that will appropriately prepare me for the role? So as you're asking that as like a graduate student, they can I remember I was sort of looking at project management roles, and the interviewer was saying that I could start to structure my life and my university work in a way that aligns with the role of a project manager.
I loved what you were saying around authenticity. And again, I think it speaks to what you were saying before about building relationships. I don't think you've been lucky at all. I think you've done a great job, Amber, of being really prepared. And then when the opportunities have come, you've been able to meet them. If you was to give, like, say, your top 3 tips across kind of everything we've talked about today for graduates, they're in uni now, they're grinding. They're trying to get it done. They're trying to get that first and start their careers. What would you say, just your top 3 in terms of things for them to kind of try and focus on?
I'd say focus on building connections with people. One thing, again, one of my managers said to me was, when you started this sort of grad scheme, because there's a grad cohort of like 30 of us or something, and one thing he said to me was, you need to make your effort to go to all the social events that are organized by them, because these graduates, you may see them now as like just other graduates at your company or at your level, but after this they're going to go to this company and this company and this company. So one thing he said to me that did stick with me is invest in those connections now. So I think a lot of people sort of focus on networking or building connections with higher ups because they've got those experience, or maybe looking for like a mentor in them. But you can also learn from people on your level. So I would say definitely don't take for granted networking or building relationships with people at your level. So I'd definitely say that first of all. I'd say do whatever makes you uncomfortable. So I'd say if it's like you're thinking to apply for a role that you don't feel like, that you feel like you're underqualified for, or a company that is very unlikely that you're going to get it, you don't know the likelihood until you've tried. And so I definitely say do whatever makes you feel uncomfortable in that sense. One thing that like I'm trying to work on literally as we speak is going to networking events. I'd say particularly go by yourself. Don't go with your friends if it can be avoided, because when you go with your friends, you're less likely to like separate from your friends and speak to other people in the same way that people are less likely to approach you because you've already sort of found what you're there for. Like literally I was at a networking event last week that I went to by myself, and then I saw like this girl that was just standing in the corner, and I was like, hi. And then like literally like that's like we speak all the time. So I'd say do whatever makes you feel uncomfortable is the second. And then the third, I would say never stop learning. One thing I definitely regret from my internship is like that was in a particular like space in like tech, and like I learned the stuff around it. And when I was at that company, you could sit like exams and like get certified in that space. And I studied for the exam, but I never actually sat the exam. And it's like I've now moved on from that. I don't know if I'll ever go back to that company. But I could have had more to show for it. So I would say, do the courses, but if you have, basically just take advantage of the opportunities you have. I think it's very easy to be, especially how like at university, I was like not the most like proactive and like, you know, like
yes,
I did what I had to do to like get the grades, and then because I enjoyed my dissertation, that's when I was like most focused. But every opportunity that comes by, like get everything out of it, because when you move on, you most likely not move back, but have something to show for it when you progress to the next stage.
What's some of your favorite tips, or what would you recommend in terms of like interview prep, preparing for interviews? I know you've had a lot of success there, so you got any gems you want to share with the people?
From the top of my head, I would say, not over preparing, because you can tell interviewers like for you to be a human. They don't want to hear a script. They don't want to hear a chat GPT generated template of what you've studied. And I see a lot of like these hacks online, like have your a benefit of virtual interviews is that you can have your notes on your screen and they'll never know. You can tell, they know. Like they can very much tell, they can very much feel it when you're reading off a script or prompts. And it's okay to have those prompts. Like I definitely had my prompts, but make sure your prompts are prompts and not the whole like script that you're reading off, because it loses that authenticity.
Perfect. Well, Amber, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been a beautiful, brilliant conversation. I think you're incredible. I think you're very inspirational, and we can't wait to see everything you're going to do next.
Thank you for having me.
No worries.